If you do it enough times, you're guaranteed to have a disabled or even a dead child.
They were deliberately trying to poison the public then, that's what you're saying, via these
Oh,
bees?
these ones, yes, for sure.
That nothing that was on the ingredients list was actually in the liquid, is that correct?
It's true. What they found is radioactive materials. They are all the driver of chronic disease epidemic that we have today. Number one, it always starts from there.
Across the globe by millions and
Today we're going to talk about the V's, and when I mean V's, I mean these things. This is the code name I'm going to use today. The V, the C, just helps with the, for sensory reasons. So today I'm joined by Sasha Latypova, who's a clinical trials expert. She's worked in pharma for 20 years and studied thousands of tests. So welcome to the show, Sasha, and thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Kerry. Thank you for inviting me.
You're most welcome, and thank you so much for giving me and the viewers your time today to help the viewers. So I came across you because you've studied thousands of reports about what was actually in the V's guys, from 2020. And you've labeled them as bioweapons and said that the label is a lie. Could you just give me, what you actually found with what you studied?
So I started looking into this issue sometime toward the end of 2020 when it was being advertised as the preventative measure against the scary things that were going on at the time, allegedly. And that kind of started me looking into the whole issue. Prior to that, I was, at that point, I was already retired from the pharmaceutical industry, but my expertise is in pharma, in clinical trials, and especially when it has to do with compliance with good manufacturing practices, which is the pharmaceutical law that regulates purity, potency, adulteration of the products, potential, safety, efficacy issues. And so I was naive at the time, and I believed that FDA regulators were largely doing their jobs. There was corruption here and there, but not a major deal. And, so when I started hearing that these products are going to become, mass offered preventative measures, including to children, pregnant women, my hair stood up on my head because I knew about the class of this particular technology. And I knew that it was already deemed extremely risky, extremely toxic, extremely dangerous by the regulators prior to 2020. And there were a lot of documentation to that, and it still is on the FDA website, accessible to anyone. So I knew about it, and everybody else also knew about it in the industry, I assure you. So because of the advertisements or statements from the regulators and public health officials on media at that time, I started looking into the what's called batch variability, when the product became available and when the information or data became accumulated already in VAERS database of CDC. And which is Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System of the CDC. The data accumulated extremely rapidly in extremely large amounts, and so I started downloading and looking into it based on batch variability. Batches are, the products are produced in batches. They're labeled with particular alphanumeric codes. And those codes exist in the VAERS system, although there are a lot of issues with how it is recorded, and there's a lot of problematic data because it's self-reported or reported by somebody else, and people not always have this information, and they don't always even input it correctly. And so, but even given those limitations, it was undeniable, the signal was undeniable that of huge variability existed from batch to batch of the product, meaning that, in some batches you would see a lot of adverse events and deaths reported, huge amounts. So even a single batch like that would have previously taken off the market immediately. But the regulators would not do anything, even with all this evidence and some issues were reported early on. Within like 2 weeks of product going on the market, Orange County, California health department stopped quickly, like temporarily, didn't stop, sorry, they flagged it. They flagged a batch and said, we have abnormal amount of adverse events in this batch. And that was reported widely by the news, even, mainstream media like Fox News, CNN, ABC, all of them reported on this. But nothing was done. So they acknowledge that we have a problem. Nothing is being done. That same batch was continued to be sold all over the United States, and it resulted in 65 deaths at least. So meaning the VAERS is underreported by a factor of like 100. So it could be 6,500 deaths all over the United States, and thousands and
Sorry,
thousands.
can you just say that again? So just so I understand what you mean. So it was 65 deaths, but you're saying it could be 6,500. Could you just explain how?
6,500. Because historically, when the researchers, so this was reported, I believe, by Columbia University, they looked in the underreporting factor of VAERS, meaning how many, if you have a report of particular event there, then how many other reports did not get submitted, because it's a voluntary system. So, and a lot of people, a lot of health professionals don't even know that it exists. They don't even know that they're obligated to report. If you do a random survey of nurses and ask them, do you know about VAERS? Do you know that you're obligated to report? They'll say no.
So what was actually happening then? People were just dropping dead. I mean, when you say adverse, like heart attacks or?
Yeah, and many deaths. So when I started, researching this more closely, many deaths were there was thousands of deaths on the day of vaccination, within hours of doing the poke. Yeah, there were thousands of deaths.
That's terrible.
Yeah,
absolutely terrible.
I personally witnessed a person passing out on the floor of a grocery store right after, with his card lying right next to him conveniently, and everybody was just like walking around him as if nothing was happening. I'm to this day I'm traumatized by that. I traumatized by not just that happening, but how people were reacting to this, as if nothing was going on.
Like a zombie. Was he having a heart attack on the floor?
Anaphylaxis. So anaphylaxis, which is a very common thing with all of the V's, not just these ones, but with these ones, it was a very well-known thing right from the start, and it's tracked in the manufacturer's reports, and it's tracked everywhere. But again, as I said, no reaction from the authorities, no action from the authorities, even though there are numerous layers of enforcement powers that the authorities have, the manufacturers do voluntarily, typically, when they face liability. But in this case, they have no liability. That's why all of this is continuing today. And so anyway, so I started looking at the batch variability issue. I found extreme batch variability, which to me said that these products are not good manufacturing practice compliant. And that's that type of analysis, as I said, everybody in the industry who understands the manufacturing knows to do immediately. And this is actually what I was doing with external data, is enshrined in every manufacturer's quality system. So every quality system, internal data tracking of the manufacturers, has the same ability to do the same analysis, but a much more reliable data set than I was using. And not a single one of them ever said anything about this, reported, have done any action. And, as I said, this is just a complete violation of everything you think about pharmaceuticals or mass-produced products of any kind.
So what were they actually, so I think you said on our call before this that nothing that was on the ingredients list was actually in the solution, the liquid. Is that correct?
It's true. So what I've reviewed thousands of tests of the products as found in the field. So people would get hold of them somehow, and then do whatever tests they could do, whatever lab equipment and method they had available. And so with variety of methods, variety of randomly picked products from the field, what became very quickly evident is that, first of all, anything under the sun is found there, and then not a single one of them complies with the label as it hangs on the FDA website or manufacturer's website or on the cartons or now inserts. Previously, inserts were blank. Now they contain information, but nothing in that thing comports with what the label says, not even close.
Could you just check right now that you are subscribed to the channel, please? And if you're not, please subscribe now. And also click that bell notifications button, because otherwise, if you don't, the next time I post a video, you might just not see it at all and then not have anything to do, not see this channel ever again. So please click now the bell notifications button as well.
And so that's the problem we're having, is that nobody actually knows what's in them at any point in time. In general, you can say, in totality, if we review all of this, we will find most likely this, and this. But the specific dose as dispensed to the patient doesn't. And that's how the law is written. The dose as dispensed to the patient absolutely must comply with everything that the label says, very precisely, within very tight ranges of quality control. And it's not even close, it's not even in the same ballpark. So that's what the situation is with these things.
What did they find in the shots?
Well, what they found is, first of all kinds of what would be deemed contaminants, whether accidental or intentional. They are a variety of things. Some are just macro objects, visible, floating in them. There was one or two batches that Japanese regulators stopped at some point because of the visible floating matter in them. Turned out to be some sort of metal shavings or something. But nothing else of that matter was reported, publicly. But routinely, people find floating objects in those things. Then, visible to the naked eye. Then there are microscopic things, and then there are metals. So a lot of metals. Some of the more extensive studies that I've seen found something like 55 different metals in them, and majority of them are very toxic. So it's aluminum, mercury, titanium, lead, gadolinium, some very esoteric things like antimony, which is from a semiconductor manufacturing pollution. But like even radioactive materials were found. So it's really just the whole table of elements that you can think of. Then in addition to that, what's often found is that's called DNA contamination. So it's called DNA contamination. What it meant is synthetic DNA contamination, and synthetic DNA is a whole other can of worms. It has nothing to do with actually anything alive. It's also a collection of toxic chemicals, but basically that's found. The endotoxins are found, which is bacterial excreted toxins, and bacteria are there because bacteria such as E. coli are part of the biopharmaceutical manufacturing process. So they grow these synthetic DNA pieces in E. coli bacteria, and then they are supposed to kill them with antibiotics. And but they don't kill them completely, and they don't remove them completely. So you have always the remainder of these bacteria, and they're endotoxins. Then the antibiotics themselves are also found because they're used in the production. Ethanol is also found, which is very dangerous if injected. So ethanol is there. So every ingredients from the manufacturing process, the in-process materials are also found there. So just a giant list of mess. And as I said, it's pretty random. So sometimes some things are there, sometimes other things are there. So it's really, really hard to tell. Again, huge variability, uncontrolled process. Nobody cares about the quality. Nobody cares about compliance.
And you mentioned the metals in there. Do you think that could be used to sort of make people into like an antenna with these EMF towers? Because people are talking about that, aren't they? That they're trying to attack us via the towers. Is that why they're putting metal into the... Do you think that could be a reason why they're putting metal into the Vs?
I highly doubt it. I think, as I said, in my opinion, it's just because there is no control of the process and manufacturers themselves don't control it. A lot of materials, active substance especially, comes from the military manufacturer, military and intelligence. So CIA and DoD control what's called National Resilience Company. They have other investors. They have a lot of private investors as well. But it's a large, very large biomanufacturing facility controlled by the U.S. government, and it's one of the providers of the active substance. And so that place, they do whatever they feel like doing. But I don't think that it's specifically to make people into antenna. Now, you can, injecting metals is very, very dangerous because it collapses your entire blood flow, collapses the colloidal stability of your blood flow. And colloidal stability is determined by a negative electric charge on the surface of all the cells in your blood flow. Because blood flow it's water, largely water, containing very complicated mixture of lipids and proteins and cells and other components of the blood that all need to be separated because they can't stick together. It needs to flow. And just like traffic flow. So if you have separation between vehicles in the traffic, they will all be going at a constant speed. But if you start having very little separation, you're going to start having pileups and traffic jams. And so the same concept applies here. In the blood flow, everything is separated by negative electric charge on the surface of the cells. When you inject metals get into the blood somehow. Most of the time, a lot of the time, they're positively charged. And so it's just like a toaster in a bathtub, immediate reaction. They stripped that negative electric charge, and that's why, some people were showing on the microscope, when you pour the solution from the vial on the fresh blood under microscope, it immediately creates these rouleau structures, like the red blood cells sticking together like coins. And that's what it is, and that's the beginning of microclotting, and it can continue because once something in the blood, it's hard to for the system to get it out of there, and once they introduce that positive charge that strips, let's say locally strips negative electric charge, now you have fallout. You have either red blood cells or there are other components of the blood that can fall out, and it can be crystals, it can be like gout, for example, those are urea crystals. It can also fall out, not just the blood, but also the lymphatic flow, anything that's flowing in the body, essentially. And then you can have like cataracts, for example. They're protein deposits on the lens, and you can increase them by having that, and by having that stuff going into the ocular spaces. Retina, sand, kidney stones, the same thing, gallbladder stones, the same thing. So all of this fallout and accumulation and crystallization is a result of somehow that negative charge got diminished or stripped by introducing the positive charge, and that's why injecting metals as part of anything, or any other V's or any other injection, monoclonal antibodies, I'm not sure that that's a great medicine because it's injectable and because it's likely to contain these kinds of offending substances.
So they were deliberately trying to poison the public then, that's what you're saying, via these V's?
Oh, these ones, yes, for sure. The other injectables or other products that may contain these kinds of things, I would assign it to poor understanding of science and profit motives, but this one is in my opinion, is a deliberate poisoning of the very large population.
So what would you say to anybody that because they're going to bring more, they're going to invent more, what would you say to anybody from now on, whether they should take any of these things or not, any of these?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not, of any kind. Not the traditional ones, not these ones, and for your animals also, no. If you want your pets to have good health, stay away from these things.
Right. So even including babies,
Oh,
children, adults,
absolutely.
nothing
Yeah.
at all.
Nothing at all. No, no, because I also I have materials and I've published about this and I've made some presentations and I'm planning to do more. But the main driver of all chronic disease, include all sorts of like cancer, cardiovascular, strokes, whatever the top chronic diabetes, autism, schizophrenia, anxiety, depression, the number one cause are those things, and not the most recent. The most recent ones, yes, they drive huge amount of that, but all of the previous ones for the 100 years that we have in them, they are all the driver of chronic disease epidemic that we have today. Number one, it always starts from there, and then additional things like food, environmental toxins, and other things. They're contributing factors after the fact. The first injury is this, and it's given in numerous shots to every newborn in this country and most of the Western world.
Yeah. We're talking about inject, guys, just to be clear. Okay. So you think that's the basis for all
Yeah,
those diseases? Yeah. Also, the people that set it up, the industry as well. They don't. It's difficult to know how to put it, but they don't mean well towards us. Let's put it that way. From my research, so I think really the best thing for people to do is to have homeopathy, isn't it? The old-fashioned solutions to get well again. To get to the medicines that God's provided us, the plants. The old-fashioned way is the way that we should be keeping ourselves healthy, and obviously via the food we eat, the drink. We've got everything on the planet that we need to be healthy, right?
yeah, exactly. It's not very difficult problem in the modern world. The number one is you need to have pure water, or at least safe water. More or less
Yeah,
safe.
yeah.
That's a whole other discussion. But in a normal Western environment, it's not difficult to get access to good water, good enough water, safe water. And separation of sewage and drinking water is number one improvement in public health. And so once that is done, the next thing is to worry about is clean food and good variety of nutrition, sunlight, obviously exercise, all the normal things that we always know to do. And if you do that, and if you stay away from the establishment medicine that's trying to continuously inject you with something, you're gonna be fine. You're not gonna need anything other than that. So, and there are obviously emergencies and accidents happen, and in that case, yes, you do need care. But other than that, you don't need anything. And people just have been brainwashed for generations that they need to go to the doctors every year and bring their healthy children to the doctors every year. And that's where we're at right now is, you bring your children there, and if you do it enough times, you're guaranteed to have a disabled or even a dead child.
Yes. So let me think. You mentioned as well, actually, there was a recent outbreak of meningitis in the UK, and now they're saying, so a load of people were apparently lining up to get the V. Then there's possibly Lyme disease going to be, put on us all. What would you say to people that only if they got the symptoms of either of those diseases should they get medical help? Because people,
Yes, and again, and you need to be very careful about. So when they have these headlines, it's obvious propaganda. It's obvious messaging ahead of the marketing awareness campaign, a messaging ahead of a product being introduced. So it's been sponsored by the same pharma companies that have a product in the pipeline that they're about to launch, and they need to generate buzz, marketing buzz. And demand and fear and all sorts of things to manipulate the public to run and ask your doctor about this and that. Nonsense. So what I advise people, turn off your TV. Okay, then you will not have a meningitis for sure. If you turn off your TV, it doesn't affect you. Same as with the C. Same thing. If you turned off your TV, you'd never had it. And so the meningitis is both meningitis and Lyme are highly manipulated concepts. Lyme is a collection of variety of autoimmune conditions, very vaguely described, very almost impossible to diagnose precisely because it's such a it's a bucket of things. There is no, it's not caused by the bacteria that is frequently ascribed to it because it's only present in a very, very small percentage of cases. So they can't find it in the majority of cases. So how can you say it's caused by this bacteria if you can't find it in the majority of what you deem as Lyme? It's also not caused by ticks because ticks, even if that bacteria is sometimes found in some ticks, it's just such a minute amount. It's impossible to cause anything, and even when they try to inject people directly with that bacterium, they can't cause Lyme. So it's again, it's a very tenuous. Another thing is in New Zealand, for example, there is Lyme, although you're not allowed to call it that. But there is Lyme, but ticks don't exist in New Zealand. So where does it come from? And so there's like numerous things like that. So it's not tick, it's not weaponized tick, and it's not bacteria. It's a variety of it exists. Yeah, people, you can have some sort of a syndrome, a collection of different illnesses, and call it Lyme, and it's typically an autoimmune type presentation, debilitating. People have kind of like a chronic fatigue syndrome also that was called the same. And so, but that's a common thing among autoimmune conditions. And number one driver of autoimmune conditions is this. There's no other way. So it's some sort of a rebranding of previously acquired anaphylactic reactions and autoimmune reactions to the injectables. That there are so many of them that now you can create these other syndromes and call them Lyme or call them something. And meningitis is another funny thing because that meningococcal bacteria that is being ascribed to it is present in almost 100% of the population. So in 50% you can easily find it by a swab, and in the rest you can find it if the gut bacteria is tested. So everyone has it. But then somehow in the very, 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 very rare cases, it gets into the brain. Well, how did it get into the brain? Bacteria can't enter the brain. We have a blood-brain barrier, and bacteria are very large. They're single-cell animals. And so they can't actually enter the brain unless there is some sort of a injection that penetrates into the bloodstream and carries something to the brain. So what I'm trying to say, meningitis is also and result of these, and result of other injectables, and result of maybe it could result from head and neck surgeries or dental surgeries that have been performed with lack of sanitary norms, or something went wrong, or something was botched, or some accident during that.
The injection when they numb your mouth.
Yeah, so it could be that there's maybe something unclean, there was a problem, and oftentimes the head and neck surgeries, because you have access very close to cerebral spinal fluid and the brain, they can result in these kinds of outcomes. But as I said, it's a collection of things where something happened, where something got into the bloodstream directly. It's not just, your random bacteria, gut bacteria, all of a sudden becoming an enemy to you. So all your life, they've been coexisting in a beautiful symbiotic relationship, and all of a sudden they become an enemy. No, that doesn't happen that way. There's something else going on.
And also, going back to the C, people were dying because they were given an injection in the hospital as well, apparently called remdesivir. Yeah. What do you know about that?
Yeah, so I know that I have a first-hand experience with that death protocol, which was still practiced in the United States as of late 2023, when they tried to murder my mother-in-law with it in upstate New York hospital in Rochester, New York. So our family experienced exact protocol, what they were doing, how they were doing it. And I also have met with numerous bereaved people whose loved ones were killed in the hospital with the exact same protocol. So the protocol is as follows. They would falsely label people with C, by using PCR test, which has never been validated for diagnostics of C or diagnostics of anything. PCR is not a diagnostic technology. It's a lab tool. It's very manipulated lab tool. It cannot be used as a clinical diagnostic for anything. So just another advice, if you are going anywhere and they're offering you a PCR test, refuse. Don't buy those tests from the antibody tests from the stores. Also, they're also not diagnostic and not validated. So they were falsely assigning C to people who were coming into the hospital, and oftentimes people didn't have anything serious at all. They were scared by the media. They had, maybe they had a cold, maybe they had a regular flu, but they were scared by the media, absolutely brainless. I mean, I've seen the examples of that. People were just in such panic and fear, driven by these propaganda headlines, that they would run to the hospital, get fake diagnosed, and the hospital would say, "Oh, you have this awful, terrible, deadly thing," when the person is normal, okay? And then they would assign them to this ward, the C ward, which was managed in the U.S. at least. It was federally funded, federally managed. By federally, I mean by the Department of Defense. It was staffed by the DoD contractors. Oftentimes, at the time, they also suspended a bunch of nursing licensing regulation in the U.S. and allowed so-called traveling nurses. So now you have nurses coming in, nobody knows from where. Nobody, locally they're not licensed, so there's no way to verify their licensing, their credentials, their anything, and everybody is in such a hurry and such a, panic that nobody cares. So these people come from God knows what, with God knows what credentials. They get staffed on these military wards. They're paid up to $10,000 a month. I mean, actually, even maybe a week. I think even a week. So some obscene amount of money these people are being paid. Again, emergency. And they're doing this. It's separate from the hospital. So even the hospital itself doesn't really have administration control over this. So they've shoved people into this ward, close it, say it's super dangerous. If you're a visitor, if you're a family member, you have to degown every time you go in, and they would just, they would put a bunch of obstacles. Initially, in the first few years, they wouldn't let people come in at all. They would not let the family members in, no matter what, no matter if you've tested negative or whatever. In 2023, thank God, they were already allowing people to come in, but my husband had to go every day, several times a day, degown, do all the stuff, and then you come in and your loved one is refused water, refused IV fluids, refused food, and they're isolated and being deliberately dehydrated. So we had to fight that. So he would go in and say, "Oh, she needs water, she needs IV fluids." And the response we would get, "Oh, no, but here we only treat the C, the dangerous C. We don't treat any other conditions like dehydration." Or if you have meds that you need to have other meds, for elderly people, they typically on many prescription drugs, the hospital doesn't allow you to bring your own medication, then it needs to be dispensed in the hospital. They would refuse to dispense it. So, the answer is, no, we're only treating the dangerous C. We're not treating all those other conditions that your elderly grandmother has. So she can now pass out from blood pressure and do others? Yeah, because they're deliberately trying to have them to crash somehow. So dehydration was number one, and that's very easy in the elderly. They're baseline dehydrated to begin with. And so that then, and refuse food and neglect and have them somehow fall crash. After that, they would try to push the remdesivir. And remdesivir is a drug that shuts down the kidney. In 53% of the patients in Africa, when they were testing it for Ebola, they had to stop it because over 50% were having kidney failure on it. It's inducing kidney failure. And when your kidney fails, then your lungs fill with fluid, and then they declare that you have pneumonia, and they put you on the ventilator, and they finish you off. And so these protocols would take 30 to 40 days to kill a person, so slow, deliberate killing, and also generate about $500,000 per head to the hospital. And so that was continuing, and that has never been brought to justice. There are numerous cases all over the United States trying to prosecute this. I'm not aware of anyone being successful so far. And because again, this is federally funded, authorized, and deliberately spread around the U.S. hospitals. And they were receiving huge bonuses. By the way, for using, if the hospital used remdesivir in any of this, then there would be a 20% bonus on top of all the billing, including directly to the nurses who were doing it and the doctors, so the staff, you know. So it's insanely evil, and it continues. I mean, they kind of on the down low right now, so they're not doing it very, very overtly, but they still maintain the infrastructure to be able to do it again. And as I said, nobody have faced any accountability.
Yeah, because they signed waivers, didn't they, that they couldn't get sued. Just before we go on to that court case that you're working on, I'd just like to focus on the fact that it was gene therapy as well and how that's affected the DNA. And do you think that, so some people might be infertile now, or maybe their children might be, but we don't know that yet. What do you know about it being gene therapy and affecting our DNA?
Yeah, well, so yes, it is a gene therapy. So technology is 100% gene therapy. So this was not. That's why I became alerted to it when they were in 2020, when they were trying to say it's going to be a preventative, because it's not. And so I knew it was gene therapy, and I knew to look up the regulations and all everything that was known about it. And the in the U.S., what people don't realize, the FDA has a discretionary authority, which is insane, but they've always had this since, I don't know, when the FDA was established in 1930s. So they have a discretionary authority to wave a magic wand and to say, well, there's this gene therapy class of product which we deem very risky, very highly dangerous, and we have this very severe regulatory guidelines written for it, listing all the problems: deaths, cancers, blindness, strokes, blah blah blah. We all know it prior to 2020, but in 2020 we wave our magic wand and we say it's now a V, and once we say it's a V, just by saying so with magic words, it goes into this other category of things which are deemed always safe and always effective, no matter what. So none of these regulations that we've written ourselves and we know very well about now apply to this, because we just said the magic word V. That's exactly how the regulation is written. So it's just as insane as if, let's say, like the automotive industry is regulated. And they say, well, if you have an engine of, V8, or if you have a truck, or you have this kind of vehicle, that kind of vehicle, well, we have all these kinds of tests that you need to do for safety, and the manufacturer must comply with all the, emissions, the safety, the how, and if something happens, then you have to do a recall. So all of these regulations apply to these vehicles. Now we wave a magic wand and we say, well, the same vehicle, exact same model, make of the vehicle is now designated a V. That means you don't have to test any of this. So now you can slap together whatever you like, send them to the consumers. Consumers can explode, whatever. Nobody's held liable because none of those regulations apply, because we just written a letter V on that vehicle. Okay, so that's how this works in practice, and so that's why the regulators to date insist that this is V, and the gene therapy rules don't apply, and it's not gene therapy, and you in fact will be censored if you, or suppressed, or smeared and prosecuted if you in a position of authority try to say that this is a gene therapy. But it is a gene therapy. There's no distinction. It's the same truck. It's just there is a letter V written on it.
What does it mean, though, gene therapy, in layman's terms?
It's a bit of a psyop. So, and that's a longer discussion also. But so genetic theory overall, it's a theory. Okay, so it's proposed as a theory when DNA was discovered. It wasn't discovered. It was actually, if people read the original paper on which Nobel Prize was received by Watson and Crick, it was published in 1953. It's available online. You can go look it up. It's a one-page proposal. I can't say it's anything other than just a proposal, an idea on the back of a napkin that you can sketch and summarize into one page with a hand-drawn sketch by Crick's wife of that helix. and actually Crick was dropping LSD at the time of this paper. So anyway, so it's a proposal, it's an idea, it's a hypothesis, okay, a theory, but it's actually never materialized in practice. And genetic theory failed as far as being correct, and on many grounds, and it's a long discussion to explain, but it did fail. So, and the reason why we don't have any products today that can effectively correct your genes, your incorrect, like, first of all, they're claiming you have a bunch of incorrect genes, they can randomly go incorrect. Even if all of that was true, then, well, if you were correct about that, then you would know how to fix that, right? But when they try to go and fix that based on those statements and assumptions that I just said, nothing works. It only kills and injures people. So that should tell you that there's something wrong with the theory. So you may disagree with me, you may say, you know, maybe I'm a conspiracist, but if you're trying to make a solution based on some premises and the solution fails continuously 100% of the time, it means that your premises are incorrect and you should revisit them. And that's what I'm saying here about the whole genetic theory. So having said all that, they're claiming that a gene therapy is something that can somehow correct your incorrect genes or incorrect expression of the genes or something else in that sequence. And so none of them work, and they're very toxic. So as I said, FDA has because these attempts have been made for over 20 years now. FDA has accumulated a lot of what's called regulatory knowledge on how these things go wrong, and they go wrong 100% of the time. And they've accumulated that knowledge with a bunch of published papers and materials, failed clinical trials, failed products, and summarized it into a guidance on cellular and gene therapies, which I have read. The final one I've read before 2020 was published in 2015. So, 5 years prior, they already had all the knowledge that you need to say this shouldn't be given to 100% of the population. Maybe some people who are, dying from cancer or some other very terrible disease and there's no options for them, maybe they should try. But other than that, you shouldn't give it to anyone because of all these issues that the regulators know. So
can it actually ruin your genes though, like this thing?
Well, the good news is if you like me have become to the realization that genetic theory has failed, well, then they can't ruin your genes either, because it's unlikely that what they tell you about your genes is actually correct. So I don't think they necessarily ruin your genes, but they do ruin your cells. That's for sure. So the cells, like what I'm saying is, people go very far out on the scientific limb of this genetic theory, and I'm saying let's come back a little bit closer to the more solid ground. The solid ground that we can come to is the cells. So the material enters the cells. In previous attempts at there were, problem, it's actually a saving grace for us, that most of the things that get into the bloodstream actually don't get into the cells, into human cells themselves. They can damage the blood flow, they can damage the bacteria, that we have many more bacterial cells in our body than human cells, actually, like by a factor of like 10. And so they can damage bacteria microbiome, and that results in a bunch of chronic illness, but they at least don't usually enter the cells. Now with this new technology, with the lipid bubbles, they were able, that's the innovation that they got. It's that lipid bubble that can more reliably hack the cells. and whatever it's dragging with it, whatever the materials they put in there or accidentally ended up there or threw in, I mean, who knows? So all those metals, those things that I was talking about, they're being dragged with those bubbles inside the cells. And that junk enters the cells, and now the cells have a choice: either try to get rid of it somehow using cellular detoxing mechanisms, or if they are unable to, they may die and collapse. And that's what that spike protein that people talk about all the time is in my opinion, is that. It's not nothing more sophisticated than that. It's debris. And so, so then it just depends on the individual, like where it went, to what organ, to what cells, what did the cells were able to do with it, unable to do with it. Now, for example, mechanism of cancer formation, again, they're saying it's genetic. I disagree, it's not genetic. And actually there's a huge amount of literature pointing that it's not genetic at all. Now, but this can create cancer, because if you have a cell that has some junk in it and the cell is trying to get rid of it and is not able to, one of the mechanisms that cells use is literally they push it into a corner, divide unevenly to try to expel it. So now you have uneven division, and if it happens somewhere where the cells are not able to just flush it out, it can accumulate. So now you have like cells dividing unevenly and creating an even number of chromosomes in them, and that's a tumor. That's how the tumors start forming, because the cell is trying to get rid of it and is unable to. That's all it is. It's not genetic, it's not expression of some genes and stuff like that. It's just basically like trash cleaning process that if you have a little bit of trash in your house, you can use it, you swipe it and carry it out and whatever. What if you have a whole bunch of stuff dumped inside your house and you're physically unable to like carry it all out? Well, that's what's going to happen, right? It's the same kind of process.
So if people have taken it and they now regret it, obviously, how long do you think they might be affected after taking it? Like, how many years could it possibly affect them for, if they're lucky enough to still be alive?
It's very, very hard to tell. As I said, it's again, there are so many variability factors. Majority of the people are probably not going to have anything terrible happen to them, even with multiple injections. That's the good news, because as I said, we have huge variability, and this variability has a silver lining that, well, not every shot was as toxic as you can imagine, right? So some of them were over diluted. There was manufacturing dilution. There was dilution when they were preparing the shots or whatever, and maybe they're just over diluted. The batch failed. Maybe there's largely nothing particularly dangerous there, and so that's how you see a lot of people, even after multiple shots, are seemingly fine. And if you're fine, if you don't have any terrible side effects, noticeable side effects, you're probably okay. So just don't do it again. You don't play Russian roulette, because the more you play, the more likely you win. But the people who do have some side effects, again, it just depends. It depends on where it went and what organs and what cells did with it. So you need to seek help with the medical professionals. I'm not a healthcare provider. I'm not a doctor. So I don't treat patients and I can't give advice on that. But there are some doctors who are now in an alternative space, who have some experience and do treat patients, and so I would advise to seek that advice. But again, very carefully, because in the alternative space, there are just as many people motivated by money and delusions, and I mean, all people are the same. But you have to kind of use your common sense and good judgment and try to find something that works for you.
Yeah, I would say to people to take a homeopathic, very natural parasite cleanses. Buy the herbs yourself, and make the mixture up. And it's things like cloves. I can't remember. You have to Google it, guys. But Dr. Hulda C. Clark, she gives you what you're supposed to take, and you could then go buy the herbs yourself and then mix it up and then drink it every full moon for 5 nights. You do it 3 nights before the full moon. But parasites basically apparently cause cancer, so certainly having regular parasite cleanses would be important, but make sure it's natural, because there are people out there that are also, yeah, like you say, pretending to, well, you didn't say this, but there are people out there that are sort of pretending to help people, and then they're selling things, and you're like, are you selling something with something in it that's going to harm me? Which is why I say go down the homeopathic route. Okay, so but some people are apparently dying of a stroke or a heart attack up to 5 years later. Apparently, that's the sort of window within 5 years. Are you seeing a lot of? I mean, I've seen a lot of those cases, so that's worrying. But I'm
Well,
wondering.
I've seen, yeah, I've seen. So I had one friend passed away from cancer very rapidly. After these, I have had a couple of friends who had some minor to more severe strokes, and I don't know whether they continued taking this V or some other Vs. That, I mean, a lot of my friends are 60 and older, and so they're constantly being assaulted by the doctors who they unfortunately trust, to do more and more of different shots, and that's, in my opinion, it's lunacy. And yeah, I just had another friend, an elderly but very very fit woman, had a severe stroke. I don't know whether it was from those V's or from some additional V's that they got or whatever. Yeah, and people continue. So there are other. Unfortunately, there's sort of rapid onset dementia. So this woman that I know had the V's, and then she had a brain surgery. They said, oh, it's minor. It was something minor, and now she has rapid onset dementia. And she's not old. I'm telling you. So at the recent party we went to their house, she didn't recognize us, and we're long-term friends. And this is heartbreaking for the family, and the family already has a disabled daughter from the V's. So it's insane. It's insane what's going on in this area. And I said, I know every family I know has a V injured child, whether they recognize it themselves or not. Some recognize it now, but most people don't recognize it. But every family has some V injury, including my own, and we just need to, recognize it as a society and stop doing this.
Yeah. And I think if I've got this correct, Agenda 2030 wants mandatory vaccinations. And I've certainly heard the president of the EU, Ursula, saying recently I saw a clip of her saying we need vaccinations on everyone, all the children, and then people in the audience were clapping. If that is coming by 2030, I mean, obviously you've made it clear that you say don't take any vaccines, but can you see a system where they actually pin us down and force a vaccine in us? Can you see that happening?
Well, do you see a system where they line us up against the wall and execute us all? Well, that's what we should treat it as. So that's what they're telling us. Okay. Sure. There have been regimes, Mao. You can think of any communist regime. They've done that. Right? They would just execute, cause famine or execute people randomly, millions of people. But we need to have the same attitude to these threats, as if they're just directly were telling us that they're just going to line us up and shoot us all. And the reaction should be the same. You should be prepared personally to fight for your family, and this is the fight to death. Again, they're telling us this. They're not hiding it. Yeah, that's my response. And can they kill me? Yes, of course. What am I? I'm an individual. I can't fight against the state. I don't have tanks and helicopters or nuclear weapons to defend myself with. But on the other hand, I'm not going to live on my knees. No, I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight, and my family is going to fight, and my neighbors are going to fight. We're all going to fight. And they can come and try to go door to door and do whatever, but the response and the reaction and message back to them should be, try it. Just try it. We're not.
So if they said you're not going to comply, yeah.
No.
So if they said to you, die or take this vaccine, what would your answer be?
I was like, come and get it. Come and make me. That's the answer. If you say or else, well, bring it on. Bring or else on, and we'll see. We'll see what the outcome is. When they have the response from the population that says, "Come and get it, come and fight us, one by one," usually that's a deterrent. When people start complying and say, "Well, it's just a little bit. Oh, yeah, no, you just put your mask on. Well, why are you making such a noise? Why are you speaking up?" That's the beginning of the end. You have to be firm. You have to stand up, and you have to tell them that they will have to go door to door. They will have to force us down. They will have to do whatever. And by the way, this is not the first time they tried. They already tried these tactics before, and they know that they don't work. So that's why we need to be very firm in our attitude and telling them, you will have to attempt the same thing that failed for you over and over and over again.
That's why I do these videos as well, just to kind of help people learn more so they can make the right decision. Because if we all stand together, we're going to be a lot more powerful. Like yes. when a lot of people go along with an agenda, then it puts everybody else at risk. But if we're all on the same page, we're going to be a lot stronger, and they're not going to succeed. And they might not even try it if everybody's like, "No, I'm never taking one ever again."
Yeah, and it's already working, actually, by the way. So the good news is, for example, Pfizer recently had to stop their clinical trial because they couldn't get any volunteers for it, which means the population is now aware. Even so you think that most people are still deluded. Well, maybe they're not telling you that, but they understand, and that understanding translates into this effect that Pfizer can't even find volunteers for their clinical trials anymore.
Yeah, I think a lot of people understand about the C, but I don't know if they understand about V's overall. That's my concern. But I know a lot of, I don't think enough people understand about V's overall. That's my concern. Yeah, so interviews like this really help. You mentioned when we spoke on the phone about being an expert witness in a court case in the Netherlands. Is that still ongoing? And how's that going?
So the cases, there are two cases. We had a hearing in Amsterdam a month ago on March 9th in the second case, which was appealing the lower court's decision to exclude expert witnesses, of which I'm one. There are 5 expert witnesses. And, the attorneys and the plaintiffs are trying to bring us in and testify in court under oath that these products are bioweapons. And so the lower court rejected us, and this was an appeal in the second case, as I said. The decision is expected this week on Thursday, on April 9th. And we expect that they will deny it, but that's not a big problem. We already have a court hearing on substantive matters scheduled on October 22nd in the lower court. And so I'm going back to Amsterdam to that on October 22nd, and other experts are planning to come, and we're also going to have a press event. It's open to the public, so the hearing is open to the public. We invite everyone to come in, everyone to tune in and try to attend and try to send a message that we are we're watching, and you can't just quietly squash us. But the case is a very unique case because in the Netherlands you can bring tort litigation as a civil procedure against individuals, which is a very unusual combination. In the US you can't do that. It's this kind of procedure is only against corporations, which doesn't produce any justice really. They just pay fines and that's it, or they may pay compensation. That's in the best case. Most of the time it's rejected. In the Netherlands, however, the defendants are individuals. They include the state officials, healthcare, public health officials, former Prime Minister and now Secretary General of NATO Mark Rutte, Bill Gates, Albert Bourla as individuals, and several state-controlled media representatives as individuals as well. And so that's an unusual procedure. Bill Gates is part of it. He's been part of the defense. His lawyers were in the room on April 9th, and so were everybody else's. And so
April,
that's
not
why.
March 9th. Do you mean?
Sorry, March 9th, yeah. Yeah, so that's why it's such a high profile and case of big interest to the public, and we're going to continue to try to prosecute it.
And what would the punishment be?
Well, in this case, as I said, it's a civil tort litigation, so the plaintiffs are seeking compensation for their injuries and acknowledgement from the state that this is what happened. It's also seeking potential referral for criminal investigations because the whole Project C was orchestrated clearly by governments, international governments, with NGOs, with NGOs like Bill Gates, and they were pre-planned, and the whole thing was orchestrated to be conducted this way. So we're seeking that as well, but we'll see where it goes. I mean, the courts are corrupt everywhere and controlled by the state everywhere. So we're not particularly, we're not thinking that this is gonna send Bill Gates in jail. But on the other hand, as I said, it's not okay to just sit down and say, oh well, they're too powerful, we can't do anything about it. No, we can do something about it, and so we're doing it.
Yeah, that sounds wise. That what you've just said. So. I think I'd just like to say to the viewers as well, apart from the detoxing, which did help me, and I still continue to do it, and things like heavy metal detox baths I take regularly, you can also ask for, you can look up on Google what the divine protection psalms are and ask for divine protection from the Holy Spirit. And I'd really recommend people do that if you've taken any of these V's, to ask for and pray on it, to ask for divine protection. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything to say on that? Because I think that is one of the, we can get this armor from Jesus, from God around us. Mm-hmm. Since I've started doing it, I feel so much asking for protection and hope for the Holy Spirit. I feel like it's changed my life. And I've only been doing it properly for about 1 to 2 weeks. And I feel such a different person. And that's not necessarily relating to the V, but just asking for divine protection. Do you have anything you want to say about that? Do you ever ask for divine protection from the Holy Spirit yourself?
Yes, I do. Daily. It's part of daily prayer. Yeah. And I know I don't, everyone has their own spiritual views, and I don't want to impose my own. People have spiritual views, people have religious views, or maybe they're atheists, but they have some other framework that helps them think through these matters. But the important thing, as I said, is to take agency. So by doing that, by let's say trying to ask for protection, you're actually taking agency and trying to establish that communication with the greater universe, greater nature, greater God, whatever you believe in, really. But it's and most importantly, it's, in my view, the most important part of that you can do, of the spiritual part, regardless of what you believe in, is seeking the truth. And we humans are fallible and corruptible. We can't know the ultimate nature of the world is not knowable for humans. Our mind is too limited to understand the grand scheme and the grand design. But we need to recognize that it's there. We need to recognize that we're made perfect, actually, from birth. We're given absolutely perfect body, a perfect health, perfect connection with nature, a beautiful, magnificent world of gifts to make us live and be happy and have families and children. But we can't, what we need to do is to maintain that, to take advantage of that gift, is seek the truth and speak the truth all the time. It's not enough to just know something and then stay quiet, as I said. So that's where majority of people fell for the V's, because they just said inside of their heads, they said, well, I need my paycheck, or I can't make waves. I can't just, what if all these other people get upset if I tell them this? And that's actually, that was like one of the things I tried to, when I was trying to tell people early on, I ran into very often in my profession when I was trying to communicate with colleagues, and they were, no, we can't tell that. People will just be upset and angry. And I was like, what are you talking about? What about if they're dead? And so that's where it comes in. It's not enough to just know something and stay quiet about it. You also have to say and speak the truth. And if you speak the truth, then you establish first of all, you establish coherence with objective reality, whatever that may be, and that's the starting point. If you're in that state more often, then you increase your chances of making the right decisions and right choices just by doing that, just by practicing that. And asking, doing a daily prayer or meditation, or I don't know what people do, yoga.
Not yoga.
Yeah, no, I don't do yoga myself either, but I'm like, okay, whatever helps you establish that connection with the objective reality, with the nature. Especially, yeah, that's why like going to nature hikes and being outside is very, very important. If you establish the connection with nature, the more you establish connection with the objective reality by seeking and speaking the truth, the more likely you are to make good choices and good decisions for yourself, for your family, and for others. And so that's my main message with all of this. That's why I think it's a very important thing to seek spiritual guidance, spiritual advice on the matters of your health, because it's all connected.
Yeah. Amen to that. And stop being so mind controlled, folks. But I know a lot of people on my channel are not mind controlled, or certainly getting out of that. And if anybody here is new to my channel, that's something that you'll learn as you watch more of these videos. Sasha, it's been great to talk to you today. I really appreciate the work that you're doing to help humans on this planet, and maybe animals as well. And where can people... I don't think you're big on social media, are you? So is there anywhere that you
I'm
want me
highly
to drop...
censored on social media. Yes.
Pardon?
I'm highly censored on social media. Yeah. So.
Is there any links that you want me to drop below for people to follow you or anything like that?
Yes. So my Substack is the main place where people can find me. It's sashalatypova.substack.com, and my publication is called Due Diligence in Art. And so that's where I publish most of my materials. You can find there, and it includes videos, presentations, and a lot of written materials and sources.
Okay, great. So I'll put a link, guys, to those, and girls, to those below, so you can follow Sasha. She's obviously knows what she's talking about, and this is her life's work, I can see. So you can keep up to date with that. So give Sasha a follow on a Substack or on that website. Yeah, thank you again, Sasha, for coming today and for helping everybody and for talking to me. Really appreciate it. And
thank you.
Yeah, all the best.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks a lot for watching. I love helping you bring news that matters to you, news that matters and that's going to matter for the rest of eternity. Here's a video coming up here that's relevant to what we've been talking about today.